be honest, I never really cared much for them, innocent or otherwise.
7 words, and when I first heard them, I genuinely did not know what to do with them. Not because they were shocking, but because they broke something I had spent 7 seasons building inside my head about who Jaime Lannister was. For 7 seasons, Game of Thrones built one of the most carefully constructed redemption arcs in television history. Jaime began the show by pushing a 10-year-old out a window. He was the Kingslayer, the man who broke the most sacred oath a knight could take, who drove a sword through the back of the king he swore to protect, the villain you were not supposed to sympathize with. And then, slowly, brilliantly, the show made you understand him. The bath at Harrenhal, the confession to Brienne, the night he sat in the water with his stump and told someone the truth about why he killed the Mad King, not for power, not for the Lannisters, not for himself, but because Aerys was about to burn an entire city alive, and Jaime was the only person in the room with a sword. He saved 500,000 people and spent 17 years being called a traitor for it. That scene reframed everything. Jaime was not a villain. He was a man who did the right thing at the worst possible moment and never recovered from how the world responded. 7 seasons of that story. 7 seasons building towards something. And then he sits across from Tyrion in a dungeon cell in Season 8, Episode 5, and says 7 words that quietly unravel all of it. To be honest, I never really cared much for them, innocent or otherwise. This is the most debated line in the final season, and it deserves to be, because depending on how you read it, it is either the show's most honest moment or its most damaging one. What Tyrion was actually asking, to understand the full weight of those 7 words, you need to understand the conversation they came from. Tyrion has found Jaime imprisoned in Dragonstone. First up on 5, warning the barbarous peasant. Be sure to tell the old wit of many places of death. We need to be loved in cold. Caught trying to slip back to King's Landing. Back to Cersei. After spending the entire previous season fighting alongside the living at Winterfell. After knighting Brienne, Tim Chatter, late night, poping. Watching the brave light and full-blown. Both neither and more in love the king to speak at night. After everything that seemed to signal his arc had finally landed somewhere good, Tyrion is trying to stop him, not just to save his life. He has a plan. If Jaime can reach Cersei, he might convince her to surrender. Ring the bells, open the gates, spare the city. Daenerys is outside with a dragon and an army. The city will fall. The only question is, how many people die when it does? So Tyrion makes his argument. Cersei is carrying Jaime's child. There is a reason, now, a new life, that might reach her where nothing else has. If Jaime gets to her, he saves not just Cersei, but 1,000,000 innocent people inside those walls. 1,000,000 people. And Jaime looks at him and says, innocent. To be honest, I never really cared much for them. Innocent or otherwise. The contradiction, one of these things cannot be true. Read that line against the history of Jaime Lannister and feel what it does. The one thing, the single act that made Jaime sympathetic across 7 seasons was the killing of the Mad King. The moment the world called treason was actually an act of pure protection. He killed Aerys because Aerys had ordered wildfire placed beneath every street in King's Landing. He killed him to save a city full of people who would never know he did it and would spend decades spitting on his name for it. The entire foundation of his redemption, the reason we were supposed to understand him differently, was that he did care, that he cared so much, in that one terrible moment, that he broke his oath rather than let a city burn. And now he is sitting in a cell saying he never cared about innocent people. One of these things cannot be true. Either the bath at Harrenhal was honest, Jaime killed the Mad King to save lives, or this line is honest. He has never cared about innocent lives. The show does not resolve this contradiction. It just lets both things sit there in the same room. The case for taking him at his word. There is a version of this scene where Jaime is telling the truth, where this line is not a betrayal of his arc but the final brutal completion of it. Think about what his life has been. He performed a genuine act of heroism, saved 500,000 people, and spent 17 years being defined as a traitor for it. He told the truth once, to Brienne, in that bath. It changed something in him, but the world never updated its view. He remained the Kingslayer, the Oathbreaker, the man who stabbed a king in the back. What if, after a lifetime of that, he simply stopped caring about the story he was supposed to tell himself? Cersei is Jaime's addiction. This has always been true. His love for her is not romantic in any clean sense. It is compulsive, self-destructive, immune to reason. He knows what she is. He has watched her manipulate and destroy everyone around her for 8 seasons. And he keeps going back. Not because he is stupid. Because some attachments exist below the level of rational choice. So when he says he does not care about the innocent, it might be him saying, I know what the right thing is. I know what a hero would do, and I am not going to be a hero. Not today. Not for strangers. Not when she is in there. That is not a redemption arc collapsing. That is a man being honest about his limits. The case that the show broke him. But here is the version I keep coming back to, and I want to be honest. This one is harder to argue against. Season 8 rushed. This is not a controversial statement anymore. It is the most widely documented failure of the final season. Arcs that needed time were compressed into episodes. Character decisions that required setup were delivered without it. The show was landing a plane that needed twice the runway. Jaime's arc is one of the clearest casualties. He left Winterfell after knighting Brienne. After a night that felt for the first time in his life like he had genuinely chosen something good. The man who rode away from Winterfell in episode 4 looked like someone who had stepped out of the story he was trapped in. And then, one episode later, he is riding back to King's Landing. Not because of a carefully constructed internal shift, not because we saw what happened inside him, because the show needed him there for the ending, and there was no time left to do the journey honestly. In that context, the line is not a revelation, it is a shortcut. A way of writing Jaime back to Cersei without doing the work of earning it. It contradicts not just the bath at Harrenhal but the entire texture of who he had become across 7 seasons of careful writing. The version of this line that works requires a version of Season 8 that did not exist. I land closer to this reading than the first one, but I hold both, because the scene itself, whatever its origins, does something that cannot quite be dismissed. What Tyrion does with it, the smarter move. This is actually the part of the scene I find most interesting, and I did not appreciate it until the second watch. Tyrion does not argue with the line, does not try to appeal to Jaime's better nature, or remind him of the Harrenhal confession, or invoke the million people. He hears Jaime say he does not care about the innocent, and immediately shifts to the only argument that has a chance of actually working. You do care for one innocent. I know you do. The child, Cersei's pregnancy, their child. Tyrion is one of the sharpest political minds in the show. He understands instantly that the abstract million does not move his brother, but one specific life, one Jaime has a personal stake in, one that represents something he has never had, might. He is not pretending Jaime is a hero. He is working with exactly who Jaime actually is, not appealing to nobility, appealing to love. Using the real Jaime, the selfish, Cersei-bound, not quite redeemed Jaime, to try to achieve a good outcome anyway. That is Tyrion at his finest. Finding the lever that is actually there, rather than the one he wishes were there. The brother, underneath everything else. And then the scene does something I genuinely was not expecting. Because everything up to this point is complicated. The line is debated. The arc is contested. The return to Cersei is the most divisive character decision in the final season. And then Jaime says this, if it were not for you, I never would have survived my childhood. You were the only one who did not treat me like a monster. You were all I had. That one is not complicated. That is 2 brothers in a cell, possibly saying goodbye forever, and one of them telling the other, you were my whole world when the world was at its worst. You were the reason I survived it. Jaime has spent the entire series being defined by his relationship with Cersei. Twin, lover, mirror, the person he cannot escape. But in this final real conversation with Tyrion, he names the bond that actually kept him human. Not Cersei, Tyrion. The little brother who read to him, who laughed with him, who saw him. Not the knight, not the Kingslayer, not the Golden Sun, but him. It reframes the whole scene. Jaime is not going back to King's Landing because he stopped caring. He is going back because caring about Cersei is the one thing he cannot stop doing, even knowing what it will cost him, even knowing it will kill him. And he tells Tyrion what he needs him to know before he goes. The final truth. To be honest, I never really cared much for them, innocent or otherwise. 7 words that broke the internet when the episode aired. Here is what I think is true regardless of which side you land on. The line is doing something real. Whether it is honest self-knowledge or desperate self-delusion, whether Jaime is telling Tyrion who he always was, or constructing a story that makes it easier to do what he has already decided, it is the most unguarded thing he says in the entire final season. He is not performing, not posturing, not trying to be the hero or the villain. He is sitting across from the only person who has ever genuinely seen him, saying, This is what I am. This is what I can and cannot do. He cannot save a million strangers. He can try to save the woman he loves, and the child they made, and the brother who kept him alive through a childhood that would have broken anyone else. That is not a hero. But it might be something more honest than a hero. A man who knows exactly what he is, walks toward it anyway, and stops pretending, for just one conversation, that he is anything else. Jaime Lannister was never quite the villain the world said he was. He was never quite the hero the show tried to build him into either. He was something messier and more human than both. And in this cell, saying goodbye to the brother who was all he had, he finally admits it. Here is the question I genuinely cannot settle. When Jaime says he never cared about innocent people, do you think he means it? Or is he performing the villain so Tyrion stops trying to save him? Because those are two completely different things, and the scene works either way. I want to know which version you watched.